In The Great Gatsby, we can see how Fitzgerald's exploration of hope and idealism, romance and marriage, class, wealth and status, the American dream, and morality and materialism reflects aspects of his context. Welcome back to the Roaring Twenties and the Jazz Age, old sport. What a party! You're our guest of honour, but allow us to introduce the host, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Fun fact, he popularised the phrase the Jazz Age to describe America during the 1920s. So, what's so special about this decade? Well, after the end of World War I, America entered a new era of prosperity and freedom, fuelled by illegal liquor, loud music, and a surging economy. Legions of self-made Americans got loose. And F. Scott Fitzgerald was one of them, although his rise to fame was like J. Gatsby's, complicated. In fact, you'll find some striking similarities between Fitzgerald and his two central characters in The Great Gatsby, J. Gatsby, our tragic hero, and Nick Carraway, the guy who tells us the story. All three originated from America's Midwest and moved east to make their fortune. Consequently, they were all traumatised by their exposure to the upper classes and the excesses of American life. Thus, the triumphs and disappointments of Fitzgerald's life were the primary material for his work. And the Jazz Age, which was simultaneously dazzling and disgusting, was the essential backdrop to it all. Born in 1896, Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald was the son of middle-class parents from Minnesota. His father, Edward, was a struggling businessman who was prone to failure and alcoholism, while his mother, Mary, was a greengrocer heiress whose money kept the family afloat in hard times. His family's financial difficulties chafed young Fitzgerald as he became acutely aware of all the things he couldn't have. So, he decided to flip that narrative. As a young man, Fitzgerald displayed the kind of hope and idealism we see in J. Gatsby. His extraordinary gift for hope drove Fitzgerald to seek out the promises of life and make his own luck. Despite his poor high school grades, he charmed his way into Princeton University, which was paid for by his grandfather. Once admitted, Fitzgerald revelled in the Ivy League social scene. Studying was his last priority. Having published his first story at age 13, Fitzgerald was determined to become a successful writer. This was his Platonic conception of himself, his idea of his truest, most essential self, and he was dedicated to manifesting it. But rigid, institutional learning disagreed with Fitzgerald. Instead, he joined Princeton's literary and theatrical clubs and formed close bonds with people who would eventually help his career. A little networking never hurt anybody, right? Fitzgerald's keen social aspirations also gave him a tendency to pursue girls who were born into money. In 1915, at the tender age of 18, Fitzgerald began a love affair with 16-year-old Ginevra King. This relationship formed the basis of his understanding of romance and why it doesn't always end in marriage. Ginevra King was an old money heiress from Chicago. Her family's wealth was inherited through generations, making Ginevra a highly desirable debutante. In fact, she was one of Chicago's Big Four young single socialites who were widely celebrated for their beauty, status, and accomplishments. One of Ginevra's friends was Edith Cummings, a talented amateur golfer. She went on to win titles and grace the covers of sports magazines in the early 1920s. If that sounds a lot like Jordan Baker to you, you're spot on. Fitzgerald modelled Daisy and Jordan on Ginevra and Edith. In short, Ginevra King was way out of Fitzgerald's league. She was expected to marry someone from her elite social circle, not fraternise with middle-class boys like Fitzgerald. But, just like young Daisy and James Gatz, Ginevra and Fitzgerald fell madly in love. They courted through copious love letters and secret rendezvous until her family finally intervened. Ginevra's father grilled Fitzgerald about his financial prospects and concluded that he was unsuitable. He spelled it out to Fitzgerald that poor boys shouldn't think of marrying rich girls. Words that forever haunted him. The relationship fizzled after that, and Fitzgerald would pine for Ginevra for the rest of his days. She was his unattainable first love, a flashing green light that was forever out of reach. This was also a painful lesson in class, wealth, and status for Fitzgerald. America may have been a relatively young country, but it had a thriving de facto aristocracy. Firm boundaries existed between the classes, even within the classes, and Ginevra's family were part of the established upper class. They differentiated themselves from the lower upper class, who were considered new money. Rather than inheriting their wealth, the lower upper class got rich quick through shrewd business practices and smart investments. Not that criminality was the norm, but millionaires were made in the Jazz Age thanks to PROHIBITION, the nationwide ban on alcoholic beverages from 1920 to 1933. Bootlegging, or the illegal trafficking in alcohol, was a fast track to fabulous wealth if you didn't get caught. Isn't that right, Mr. Gatsby? But Fitzgerald wasn't even new money. He had no money. As the son of an unsuccessful businessman from the Midwest, he didn't stand a chance in Ginevra's rarefied world. After the breakup, she was able to retreat back into the comfort and protection of her family, just like Daisy does after the unpleasantness at the Plaza Hotel and that car accident. Meanwhile, Fitzgerald was adrift and suicidal after the breakup, so much so that he dropped out of Princeton in 1917 and joined the US Army, hoping to die in combat in World War I. But he didn't die. In fact, he wasn't even sent to Europe. Instead, while stationed in Alabama in 1918, 21-year-old Fitzgerald struck up an affair with Zelda Sayer, a young Southern belle from a well-connected family. But Fitzgerald wasn't serious about Zelda until he found out that Ginevra had married some rich, polo-playing tycoon from Chicago. Hello, Tom Buchanan. Actually, his name was Bill Mitchell, and their wedding was splashed all over the social pages as a triumph. Ouch. That's when Fitzgerald and Zelda started talking about marriage, but she wouldn't marry him until he'd made something of himself. So, after the US Army discharged him in 1919, Fitzgerald went to New York City to make his fortune and failed. Zelda broke off their engagement, and Fitzgerald returned, crestfallen, to Minnesota to live with his parents. In the summer of 1919, in a last-ditch effort to save himself, Fitzgerald rewrote his manuscript for a novel titled This Side of Paradise. He sent it off to a publisher with a prayer, and a short time later, Fitzgerald received the telegram he'd been hoping for. They were going to publish it. Woohoo! This Side of Paradise became the best-selling novel of 1920 and catapulted 23-year-old Fitzgerald to instant fame and fortune. Now that he was rich, Zelda agreed to marry him, so the pair got hitched in New York in April 1920. Holy Nelly, what a roller coaster! But that's the American dream for you. Fitzgerald believed that he could have it all, regardless of his humble origins, and with a golden combination of talent, hope, hard work, and determination, he achieved his dream. His overnight success is reflected in Jay Gatsby's impressive rags to riches story. Driven by his love for Daisy, the low-born James Gatz amasses an incredible fortune within 3 short years. His glittering material wealth is symbolised or represented by his mansion, which is a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy. Then you have the spectroscopic gaiety of Gatsby's star-studded parties, where people performed stunts all over the garden. Likewise, the Fitzgeralds were the toast of New York City, where the jazz age was in full swing. They were the original it couple, young, rich, beautiful, and badly behaved. Their drunken party stunts saw the newlyweds evicted from 2 expensive hotels where they were living. Of course, their alcoholism caught up with them, and the pair frequently argued. Did the American dream reward them with too much too soon? Even so, the couple welcomed their daughter Frances in 1921, and Fitzgerald kept writing. His second novel, The Beautiful and Damned, was published in 1922 and was another smash hit. The Fitzgeralds then moved to Great Neck, Long Island, a new money enclave and Fitzgerald's model for West Egg in The Great Gatsby. While living in Great Neck, the Fitzgeralds attended lavish parties and rubbed shoulders with Long Island's elite. One of their wealthy neighbours really caught Fitzgerald's attention, a man named Max Gerlach. This mysterious millionaire shrouded himself in myth. He was a dashing World War I hero, claimed to be educated at Oxford University in England, and was rumoured to be related to the German Kaiser. He also addressed men as old sport and was a bootlegger during Prohibition. Now, who does that remind you of? Despite all the glamour, Fitzgerald couldn't feel at ease with this crowd. There was something off about them. Ultimately, he found them immoral and disappointing, a view he would later express through Nick Carraway. Material wealth can't buy love, true happiness, or fundamental decencies like honesty and integrity. Instead, it attracts freeloaders like Klipspringer and casual moths who fly away at the first sign of trouble. After writing them all off as a rotten crowd, Nick Carraway returns to the Midwest, where it's comfortable and familiar. Fitzgerald felt similarly about the Long Island crowd, and in May 1924, he relocated the family to Europe. They stayed on the French Riviera while Fitzgerald worked on his manuscript for The Great Gatsby. It sounds ideal, but they were in crisis. Zelda had an affair with a French naval aviator and asked Fitzgerald for a divorce. He then tried to confront her lover, who fled and refused Zelda's request for a divorce. So they stayed together, but their marriage was now damaged beyond repair. Fitzgerald still managed to complete Gatsby in October 1924, despite all the drama, or maybe because of it. The emotional extremes in the novel, the infidelities, jealousy, rage, grief, and intense longing for the past, were all coloured by the maelstrom in Fitzgerald's head. The novel is about the death of dreams and illusions, something that Fitzgerald was coming to terms with. In his journal in 1924, Fitzgerald summarised the tragedy in The Great Gatsby as the loss of those illusions that give such colour to the world that you don't care whether things are true or false, as long as they partake of the magical glory. Thus, the magic glory faded for Fitzgerald. Zelda became increasingly depressed after this episode and suffered a number of breakdowns. In 1930, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and spent the rest of her days in and out of psychiatric hospitals. Fitzgerald kept writing after the mediocre success of The Great Gatsby, but became a hopeless alcoholic. His health and the quality of his work suffered, and by the 1930s he was living in relative poverty. Tragically, Fitzgerald died of a massive heart attack in 1940, 1 year after becoming sober. He never got to enjoy The Great Gatsby's revival in the 1940s and its eventual recognition as a modern masterpiece. Well done, team. In this lesson, we've covered how aspects of Fitzgerald's context shaped his exploration of hope and idealism, romance and marriage, class, wealth and status, the American dream, and morality and materialism in The Great Gatsby. Now you're ready to write some jazzy responses to dazzle your teachers. We hope you enjoyed this Schooling Online production. For more easy lessons, check out our other videos.